directly to the text layer. So this is being applied directly to that text layer underneath. Let's see if we can see what it looks like. I have black, so it's not really gonna show, but I can drag it to the layer underneath there so you can see it changing. But it's really good to be able to target things by clicking that Alt button and going in between the layers and turning it on or off. That applies it just to the layer that's underneath the arrow right there. All right, so we have our adjustments, we have our properties panel, which allows you to change things. We have our swatches, our gradients. All right, to use a gradient, you're gonna click your gradient tool. You can drag with your gradient to change things. All right, so what's going on, I think right here is I have my curves layer selected. I have to actually be on a layer, so I'm gonna delete my curves layer. I'm gonna create a layer on top of this so that you can see the gradient. So I choose my gradient. I can either choose black to white, I could do color to transparency. Let's do color to transparency and drag out my color. And if I wanna change that color, just double click on this, change the color. This allows me to change all that. You can change how deep it goes into the next color. So I want it to be short, I want it to be longer. You can even change this on this end if you want it to be a color, to go into another color. Here in your properties, there's some other things. Right here, this is you can change whether or not you want it to be, where you want the placement to be. You can also change the scale of it, right? So different things you want. You can even reverse it to be on the other side. So that's your gradients. So right now I'm just doing a linear gradient. You have radial gradients, you have diamond, you have these types of gradients. So different types, radial, all right? So, or diamond, I guess, diamond. So different gradients, and as you can see here, it created a layer, gradient layer. So you can either do that or you can do it within another layer. So this allows you to do a classic gradient the way that, so you can either do a gradient as a fill layer automatically, or you can click on that and change it to a classic gradient where you can just do gradients in your picture, whatever picture you're on, you can do a gradient. And again, it's doing that diamonds because that's what I have selected. If I go back to my linear and do linear, it'll just do a gradient based on that. And then I had reverse on. All right, so that's the gradient. Let's see, so swatches, gradients. If anything ever disappears on your screen, you can go to Window and go to all of these right here. These will show you the panels once you click on them. So if I want to see my history and go back to before I had all this, I can go back and click back. Let's see how far it goes back. So I can go back to way back when I did my layer order, or I can even go back to revert back to the initial design. So layer visibility, that was the last thing I did. So your history allows you to see all the steps that you've done from a point. This is usually set to 50, but you can raise that number if you want. Some people like it at around 200, so they can go back 200 steps. It just comes down to how much memory you have on your computer, and see how, because it'll start to slow down your program depending on how many steps you have. All right, so that's your history. To close a panel, I just go like that. To expand a panel or collapse it, I can double click it. I can even drag to make it bigger or smaller if I want to use it. I just went in between and clicked and dragged. Over here you have other things. Each panel has its own menu, so you can use those menus in there. Create new layer down here, create new layer, delete a layer, delete. You can also just hit your delete button and that'll delete it. So like I said, this is contextual based on whatever I have chosen. So let's go to a paintbrush and you can see it changes based on what I have selected. So it changes based on what I have selected. Usually once you change something, it'll ask you to confirm it. So let's take this, and I'm gonna click on this layer and hit Control T. This gives me my bounding box, so I can make something bigger, move it around, and then once I'm done, I click check mark. Or I can come up here to my Show Transform Controls under my Move tool and create Show Transform Controls. I can add pieces, I can adjust it that way. All right, so what else do we need to know? So here, as you can see, this menu is also contextual. It allows you to flip and adjust things. All right, so I think that's about it that you need. The last thing I'm going to show you is how to place. So the file menu here, and also under these menus, there's other things. So if we go to, let me check mark so you can see this again. So layer, we have under layer, you have new layer. You have fill layers that you can use. You can merge your layers or flatten your layers. Under select, you have select subject, change the sky. You can do that. Under edit, you also have sky replacement. So those are very useful. So select subject, I usually start out a piece like that. So let's open one up. So select subject is a really good one to start with. It's the same as clicking this button down here at the bottom. So deselect, so if I click select subject, it selects her. All right, if I want to refine it, my selection, I can click select and mask. This allows me to go in and refine my selection. It usually starts off with overlay right here, and you can go in and fix things. I call this the hairbrush, but what it does is allows you to take out some of the selection in some of the areas that are a little bit more fuzzy. See if we can get rid of some of that blue. And then you click OK, it creates a mask from it, right? You can do the mask right here to get rid of that. Or you can do the mask down here in the bottom right. Or you can go up to the top and you can say layer mask, all right, to do it that way. So this little menu that they created is very useful, that allows you to select. Let's go, I'm gonna click on this one, and I'm gonna change out the sky replacement. Let's see what skies they have. Right, so changed out the sky, really useful, especially if you're working in like tourism and stuff like that. Also under filter, we have a bunch of different things. We have our sharpen, we have our sharpen edges, we have our distorts, our blur, and our blur gallery. So Gaussian blur is under there. Radial blur is a good one. Unsharp mask is for sharpening, not unsharpening. And then we have our filter gallery, our camera raw filters up here. All right. And so let's save this. So when you're saving, you want to save a copy. This allows you to save it as a JPEG or any other format. So lots of different formats. The one that we're going to be using are JPEG. You want to save as a native Photoshop document. You want to save, if you want to keep your layers, you save as a Photoshop document. TIFF also keeps layers. You can save as a Photoshop document that way. And PDF. I'll show you how to do PDF. So PDF is under export, I think. So export as, let's see. No, that's not it. So PDF is, let's see, what was it under? Save a copy? Yeah, Photoshop PDF. It's under save a copy. If you're gonna just click save, this will save it as a native Photoshop document. So I'm gonna click save, and it saves it. And save as allows you to change the name of it. So you can change the name and then save it as these TIFF, Photoshop, PDF, or Photoshop. This large document is only if you're working in a really large format, and then you can save it as that as well. But again, that's very slow. If you start to get into those sizes, it'll automatically save in that format, but it's a very slow format to be working in. All right, and I think that's it. The last thing I'm going to show you is place embedded. So placing it embedded, it brings it in differently. So I'm going to place that in there. I can transform it. I can warp it if I want to warp it. Stretch it how I want. And you can warp things even if you don't have, if it's not placed in there. So if I want to warp this, I'm going to say layer via copy. So I copied it on its own layer. You can see it right there. And I'm going to warp that. I'm going to go Control T, and there's my warp. I can warp this as well. This is really nice for getting things to fit in if you're photoshopping something. All right, so I warp that, and I can merge those layers. I hold down Shift to select more than one layer. Merge layers, and let's use my spot healing brush to clean that up. So I'm making my brush bigger by using my left and right brackets. Alright, so clean that up a little bit depending on what you're going for. Obviously, the more time you spend on photo retouching and using these little tools in small portions, you don't want to do things too drastic. Usually when you're using the spot healing brush, you're just keeping your brush small and you're doing a little bit at a time. And clone stamp, you want to do things, you don't want to go exaggerate and just drag over with a big brush. So I think that's it, and I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions,